Welcome back to Turning Point Tonight, where we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for sticking with us. Let's check in with Turning Point's White House correspondent Monica Page as, we're talking education today. We've been talking about the Department of Education for a while, and there's some recent updates coming out. Monica, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, since President Trump has become president, we know that the Department of Education has slashed about 4,000 jobs already, but that's just the beginning. Today, President Trump signing an executive order to start dissolving the Department of Education. Now, this isn't completely removing it right off the bat. That's going to take some time and needs to go through Congress to actually pass. But slowly but surely, this will start to kind of remove some of the employees from the Department of Education and take that funding, about $3 trillion that we've spent on the Department of Education, and move it to the states, local funding to these states here and their curriculums and their programs. I mean, you hear the left talk all the time that we need better schools, we need better education systems. This will help with just that. And I mean, since its development in 1979 under Jimmy Carter, I mean, the cost per student has risen about 245%, but the return on investment hasn't been so good, Joe Bob. I mean, the test scores have only risen about 2% since 1979. I mean, that's not much of a difference at all. So a lot of people are really upset about this. Our students really aren't getting the best education. They aren't really seeing any kind of significant improvement in test scores, especially year over year. So this is hoping to kind of combat that issue and set up our students and schools for success from now on.
Yeah, you know what I think is really interesting about this is that the education system as a whole has been a lib thing. Liberals have been like, we
Mhm.
are the party of education and, whatever. And like you've said, the education system in the United States has gone just downhill and the trajectory is still downhill. With that being said, is there any word out of the White House how they're going to communicate that message to the American people? Because you said it does have to get through Congress to completely dissolve the Department of Education. But at the same time, while a lot of us are skeptical that Congress will actually do it, there is a chance that the White House can make the case strong enough to the American people where it's possible to get through.
So that's exactly what President Trump is really hoping to do. I mean, we'll hear from the president later on today. By the time your show is on, we'll probably have already heard from the president. But we also know that, the Republicans have the majority in the Senate. You need but that probably won't be that much. You probably need about 7 Democrats to really push through that threshold to officially abolish the Department of Education, essentially. But hoping that President Trump can make that pitch and kind of convince some of these Democrats and maybe some middle of the road Republicans that, the abolishment of the Department of Education will really essentially be a good thing. So we can definitely expect the president to come out maybe in the coming days or months to speak to some of these Democrats, some of these Republicans, and really hope that this could become a thing from now on. But I mean, to be honest with you, Joe Bob, my mom is a high school English teacher and she is in full support of this. And, you talk to a lot of teachers across the country who are actually in support of the abolishment of the Department of Education. A lot of these public school advocates, a lot of these Democrats like to say that this is going to leave kids behind. But when you take a look at some of the numbers here, you take a look at actual teachers who love what they do and they're passionate about it. They just want their students to get the most out of their classes and the programs the schools have to offer. And, they're too afraid to speak out against the Department of Education, just how they were too afraid to speak out against their own unions and fear
Mhm.
that the union would leave them. My mom is one of them. So this is a very serious issue. And I think it's one that could actually make a material difference in the quality of how we raise our children and in the quality of the school systems across the board.
Yeah, and you make the case of, well, kids are going to get left behind. Yeah, kids are getting left behind, and it's because of
Yeah,
lib policies, and the Department of Education is not helping that at all. Monica
right.
Page, White House correspondent for Turning Point. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Anytime. Thanks, Joe Bob.
Thank you. Let's get back to our awesome panel talking about this hilarious Keystone Pipeline thing. So we remember the Keystone Pipeline that everybody was all in a ruckus about several years ago. Then Trump approved it, then Biden disapproved it, then Trump's going back. It's been a whole thing for a very long time. And the protests there have been, well, let's just say less than peaceful, right? everybody is for peaceful protest, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. You should have the right to speak your mind on an issue that you feel passionately about. However, there is a line. You can't start damaging property. You can't start ruining people's reputations. Defamation is a thing. There's a whole bunch of limits to where protests go. And Greenpeace broke a bunch of those limits, according to a jury. A jury has said that Greenpeace, who arguably, or at least, you know what? No, they did, because this is in this court hearing, that organized these protests, is ordered to pay $660 million because they were found liable for defamation, trespass, nuanced civil conspiracy, and other claims, according to a jury. And now it's funny because Greenpeace is now saying, "Oh, hold on, well, we didn't actually, we weren't super involved. We didn't really do any of that sort of stuff. That's crazy." Harrison, is it cool? Do we feel good about the retribution of people again breaking the law, right? That's where this all hinges on. You can't do that. Now actually getting forced to have to pay penalties and face consequences for their actions.
So this is actually little known fact about me. I grew up in the DC area. I actually canvassed for Greenpeace for a summer, and so I would stop people on the street and give them a whole spiel about like air and whales and stuff like that. And so this is all sort of like really, this is like one of the greatest mess around and find out events that we've ever seen by the left. And it actually was so funny to me. I know you're a stand-up comedian, so I wrote a couple jokes for you. This one I don't know, because like if your all's audience is much younger, so this is the most expensive tree hugging episode since the Ewoks torched the second Death Star in Return to Endor. So that's like you got to be kind of a nerd to know that one, but that's a good one to use for the old people. Tree hugging costs a lot more than just hugging your therapist. One more I thought was kind of good. I've been watching a lot of entertainment TV. Chaining yourself to the pipeline costs more than hiring Johnny Depp for a pirate sequel.
Holy.
And I think was like $200 million. Like they could have bought several professional sports teams, I think, for like $600 million. Like
there you go. Yeah.
They could have bought all of Major League Soccer, I think, for that amount of money and probably made a bigger impact.
Well, they could have bought Major League Soccer and made them wear Greenpeace shirts, stop the pipeline. So in other words, yeah, big waste of money here. The jokes are appreciated. Thanks. I might consider them. I probably won't.
Yeah, you watch
in the next stand-up routine. Savanah, so as somebody who covers protests like this, I think you can agree, like, you know, people have the right to speak their mind. It's when it comes to, you know, violence and damage and destruction, and in this case, defamation, you know, you can't do that. Can you kind of like speak to the overall kind of the thought process behind modern day protesting? Because this hasn't happened all that often where people who are breaking the law actually get held accountable.
Sure. Well, I will say that this verdict is great, and it sets an actually great precedent, because these protesters for the last decade have loved being able to say, "Oh, my First Amendment, my First Amendment." And it's like, yeah, but you can't Molotov cocktail somebody's business because you feel like it. You can't go rob a Louis Vuitton and then scream First Amendment rights. You can't go and disrupt an entire construction site in which they're trying to create this pipeline and then cry and scream victim when that's deemed a criminal act. You can't go and do these things. So I'm glad that we're finally differentiating violent protest from First Amendment rights. I think that this is a very strong precedent. And we're living through the craziest times right now, Jobob, and also the greatest, the craziest and the greatest at the same time, right? So the DOJ just today actually charged 3 Tesla vandals because they have been firebombing, shooting, like straight up shooting Tesla dealerships. So, I mean, this kind of is reminiscent of like these Greenpeace protests, right? Like these crazy tactics being used under the guise of the First Amendment. No, I'm glad the differentiation has been made. And hopefully we see more $600 million+ lawsuits being directed toward these, quite frankly, domestic terrorists. I'm going to be honest.
Ooh, there we go. Speaking of
what happened to the good protesters that just like were proud of what they're doing, now they get caught and they act like They're not like, why are you arresting me?
There actually is a good point being made there. You know, used to when you protest, right? There has to be some sort of risk, or else it doesn't mean anything. If you're not like facing the risk of like, I don't know,
you're supposed to go to jail. Like these kids are like crying when they're getting like handcuffed. I'm like, dude, that's what you're doing. Like this is the cool guy part. Like, don't you want to be a cool guy, or you just wanted to, like,
it is interesting that dynamic shift
on social media.
You know, kind of speaking of protests, right? I kind of have a feeling this weekend is going to be, in effect, a protest of a bunch of conservatives not going to see the Snow White movie. It's this live action movie that, well, has garnered some negative attention from the regular media because they decided to replace all of the little people with CGI little people because you know, God forbid, people who are of shorter stature have jobs as dwarfs in Hollywood. They replaced them with CGI, but also the Snow White cast has been making some pretty interesting claims. Glenn, give me a nod, yes or no, if we have this clip. I'm not entirely sure. Let's play this clip from Snow White herself talking about what the movie's going to look like. Check it out.
No longer 1937.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird.
Glenn, go ahead and cut it off there.
So we did.
Yeah, we don't need to hear more of that. I got about a minute left. Savannah, your thoughts. How stoked are you to see this movie after that?
You know what, Jobob? I read a comment on one of these trailers, and it said, if this movie was shown to me on a plane, I would still walk out. And yeah, I feel like that's the basic, you know, sentiment towards this. Nobody wants to watch this. The girl looks like Lord Farquaad. What are we doing?
Harrison, I'm very concerned about what you're going to say here, but we'll give you the last 15 seconds. What do you think about this?
Look, Snow White's going to suck. Nobody's going to say it. Disney's been failing for like 50 years at this point, or at least the last 10 years with everything that they've been doing. I think they get the picture, though. It seems like. I don't know why they ended up still doing this movie. They must have sunk too much money into it, but it's obviously nobody I know is ever going to see this movie. So pretty bad call by Disney, but you know, that's been par for the course for a good decade now.
I think they're going to have to make about $500 million just to break even. So that'll be really interesting to see if they get to that. Harrison Weinhold, Savanah Hernandez, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Jobob.
Thank you.
Coming up on Turning Point tonight, we're going to have an awesome clip from Alex Clark's Culture Apothecary podcast. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.